Welcome back to another video. So today I received a link to a story and a preview of an upcoming video about what is called MAID in Canada. Now, for Canadian viewers, you'll know exactly what I mean. For anybody not in Canada, MAID refers to medical assistance in dying, the state sanctioned program to allow people suffering from incurable illness to opt for assisted suicide. MAID officially is approved for adults aged 18 and over who are eligible for Canadian health services and have a grievous and irremediable medical condition. This condition is one where the individual has a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability, is in an advanced and irreversible state of decline, and experiences intolerable suffering that cannot be relieved under conditions they find acceptable. The request must be voluntary and a person must give informed consent. There has been apparently some divergence from this policy or this framework of understanding as to who's eligible. Now, of course, when MAID, which has been in Canada for the past decade or so, first was introduced, it was done so with a guarantee that there would be a number of checks and balances, and it would only go so far, that it would not open the door to widespread applications and approvals for assisted dying. That doesn't quite seem to be how this is panning out. The article I received and the story I received, I'll link it below, but here's a preview, a shot of the link. Canadian government is forcing doctors to euthanize treatable patients. Now, the allegations are being made by a number of doctors that they are being strongly encouraged, if not forced, to offer MAID as a form of treatment on the continuum scale of available treatments. And we've seen a number of cases where people who are suffering certain ailments, there's been a few notable cases of veterans in Canada who are requesting assistance for service-related trauma, physical, mental trauma, who are being offered MAID as an alternative or as a treatment, but not being offered it once and just made aware of it, but are being offered it repeatedly. The huge concern, for me anyhow, now I think I've got to step back quickly and say, I understand the rationale and the need for a policy or an alternative for people, having seen what the effects are of an incurable disease. I think that when one is able to make an informed decision, that this must be an option that is available. That's where I draw the line. There has to be a firm line in the sand as to who can avail themselves of this course of action. Now, I know this is a tricky one when you start applying moral and religious standards or beliefs and principles. My concern is how widespread this is becoming. There have seemingly there are a number of people who are availing themselves of MAID who do not fit this criteria, who have other ailments and other conditions that may be treatable. In 2027, the Canadian government is further expanding MAID. Now, I don't believe that this was the initial intent when the policy was introduced and discussed. They're expanding MAID in 2027 to include people suffering from mental illness. I don't believe they have determined what is mental illness, what are the degrees of mental illness that one must be suffering to be eligible. Mental illness, I think, like a lot of doctors would suggest, is not something that you can measure empirically. You can't take an x-ray, you can't run blood tests and say and determine somebody has mental illness at this level, therefore treatment is or is not available. And I do believe that most psychologists and psychiatrists would argue that there is always something that can be done to alleviate mental illness. Now, the premise behind MAID now is that one must give informed consent. Is one able to give informed consent if they're suffering from mental illness? Are they in possession of their own complete full faculties to make that decision? The expansion of MAID to people with mental illness is really at the doing of an organization, a charitable organization, lobby group called Dying with Dignity. Dying with Dignity in Canada has argued successfully that denying people with mental illness the opportunity to opt for MAID is a violation of their charter, of their constitutional rights, that they are being denied the same healthcare options available to other Canadians. So they successfully argued in court that MAID needs to be expanded to people with mental illness. Dying with Dignity is, I think, a very questionable organization. They are receiving a massive amount of funding from private sources and government sources. Some of the donors to Dying with Dignity include TD Canada Trust, Rogers, Google Ads, Mackenzie Investments, TELUS, Sun Life Financial, the Royal Bank of Canada, and Pfizer. Pfizer, you may have seen me in episodes such as COVID 2019. Pfizer also makes 3 of the drugs recommended by the Canadian Association of MAID Assessors and Providers to facilitate MAID. So Pfizer makes the drugs that doctors will use and are using to euthanize people. So Dying with Dignity is making a lot of money in advocating for MAID and in promoting its expansion, which I believe goes far beyond and exceeds the initial intent and objectives of the MAID program. Concerningly now is the idea that it needs to be expanded to mature minors, meaning children. There's some discussion around whether or not a child is capable of making a decision to opt for MAID. Now, already in Canada, a child under the age of 18 is able to deny certain medical interventions. The extension now being that if they can deny medical interventions, they should be allowed to ask for other medical interventions, namely MAID. That hasn't happened yet in Canada, but I do believe that in Belgium and the Netherlands, minors can already apply for their version of MAID, and a number have successfully done so. My huge concern with expanding this to minors is that it is offering a form of treatment that God forbid we see it, that many will seek. To suggest that this couldn't happen, I think we only need to look back over the past few years, how many thousands of young boys and girls suffering from so-called gender dysphoria went to a gender dysphoria gender clinic and received puberty blockers, other medical treatments, up to castration and mastectomies. It happened. I mean, and thousands of young children around the world were I'll say it how I see it, butchered by doctors because they were questioning their sexuality. They were questioning who they were. And instead of working through this with them over a period of time, they were rushed and pushed down a course of action that is completely irreversible. Completely irreversible. And I think if we just look at the CAS report coming out of the UK, I think we can see that a lot of mistakes were made, and a lot of treatments were given to young children that should never have been given. They estimate that 62% of first clinic appointments, clinic appointments, will result in a child receiving some form of puberty blocking therapy, if I can call it therapy. Now, there are no numbers in Canada. Coincidentally, Canada doesn't collate the numbers of how many children have been given this so-called gender affirming care. Interesting how no numbers, no statistics are recorded. But expanding MAID to children, I think will just be absolutely devastating, because if children have been able to rush in such numbers, not needing parental consent, to hack off parts of their bodies, what will happen when MAID is expanded to so-called mature minors? You still need to be 18 years old to get a tattoo. That hasn't changed. You can get castrated, but you cannot get a tattoo. Anyhow, so MAID now in Canada, so far, it's really still only available to those over 18 who are suffering an incurable disease or illness or disability. We have seen cases where it has been expanded and is being offered to others. And watching the clips of that video, or the preview of that video that I was sent, and again, I'll link it below, you'll see that it apparently, doctors are being encouraged to expand and offer more, offer MAID to more and more people, those that ordinarily, under the current understanding of eligibility, would not be eligible to receive that, for lack of a better term, treatment. It's concerning. You know, I absolutely have no idea what has happened to Canada. I'm seeing things that when I moved here, I never thought would have come to pass. I absolutely did not think that they would ever come to pass. One of the leading countries for this so-called gender affirming care, expanding MAID to people that don't need it, offering it to veterans, now offering it to people that in 2027, people with mental illness. And what is that? You know, you suffer from anxiety, you go to the doctor and say, I need MAID, and they say you can qualify for MAID within 24 hours. Could you imagine 24 hours? It might take me 6 months, 6, 7, 8 months to get a referral to see a specialist for a condition I want treated. But within 24 hours, I can have the sign off from a doctor to say that I'm good to be strapped down and injected with a cocktail of medications, many of which are coming from Pfizer. But it's scary. Now we're seeing potentially doctors are being coerced, encouraged to offer this more and more. Anyway, check out the link. Check out the preview of the video. I'm going to be watching for when it comes out. But let me know what you think. Do you think MAID's a good idea? Do you think it should be allowed up to a certain point? What are your thoughts on people with mental illness accessing this program? What are your thoughts on mature minors? A child, I mean, there's a reason supposedly why we don't allow them to smoke cigarettes, buy alcohol, vote, join the army until a certain age. But this, apparently, some are suggesting is acceptable. I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel, and giving this video a thumbs up and a like. And again, you know what? Hopefully this will just open up some conversation. But really, at the end of the day, guys, I'm getting worried when you know we've just lived through a period of time when the medical establishment jumped on board with the government to force people down a certain treatment pathway. And look what happened to doctors who didn't jump on board, who didn't agree. How many were struck off? What happened to those people who didn't agree, didn't want that treatment pathway? What happened to their jobs, to their livelihoods? We saw what happened. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now. All right, guys. Again, if you could, I'd truly appreciate you subscribing to the channel and giving this video a like, a thumbs up, and I'll catch you on the next one.